my strength when I am weak. You are the treasure that I seek. You are my all in all. Seeking you as a precious jewel. Lord, to give up, I'd be a fool. You are my all in all. Jesus, Lamb of God, worthy is your name. Jesus, Lamb of God, worthy is your name. Taking my sin, my cross, my shame, rising again, I bless your name. You are my all in all. When I fall down, you pick me up. When I am dry, you fill my cup. You are my all in all. Jesus, Lamb of God, worthy is your name. Jesus, Lamb of God, worthy is your name.
The Wednesday of Passion Week was totally different than the Tuesday of Passion Week. Whereas yesterday, Jesus spent a lot of time teaching parables, miracles. Wednesday, Jesus and his disciples were probably preparing for the Passover that would happen the next day. But there is one event that happens on Wednesday that starts the ball rolling for the rest of the week. The chief priests were carrying out their normal job, including preparing for the Passover celebration, when someone comes and talks to them. Judas. Phil, please take a moment and read for us what happens in Mark chapter 14.
Then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went to the chief priests to betray him to them. And when they heard it, they were glad and promised to give him money. So he sought how he might conveniently betray him.
These two verses are very sobering. Some, when they study Judas, want to add motives like he is a spy of the Sanhedrin or that he was always trying to get Jesus. All of these things just don't have the proof in Scripture, but the thing we do know is that Judas actually went to the chief priests with a purpose. He intended to betray Jesus. In Luke chapter 22, it adds that Satan can cause Judas to do this, but when you look in the passage before us in Mark does not blame Satan for what happened. Judas actually went to the chief priests. After they had an interaction, then Judas looked for an opportunity to betray Jesus. There are three things that hit me with regard to these two verses. The first is that Judas went to the chief priests. Judas, in this decision, expresses two essential truths of Scripture. First is that humanity freely chooses to do evil. Secondly, the overarching providence of God. Both of those are evident when Judas goes to the chief priests. The second thing that is significant is that the chief priests were glad. This is the same word that is used when the wise men enter Bethlehem, when they see the star, when they're on the way to see baby Jesus. They rejoiced gladly, exceedingly glad. And these chief priests were exceedingly glad for the opportunity to get ahead of what was happening. The third thing is that Judas looked for an opportunity to betray Jesus. For the next 36 hours, Judas was thinking, scheming about how he could betray Jesus. In every part of his interaction with Jesus and the disciples, trying to find a way for Judas to pull Jesus out, get those guards to come get him, and to take him away. As I sit back and you look at these three things that are in these two verses, you can see the character of God in them. You can see that God is a God of providence, where divine grace uses even human evil for its saving purposes. Just a few weeks later in Acts chapter 2, verse 23, Peter is preaching, and he says, "This Jesus, delivered up according to the definite plan and foreknowledge of God, you crucified him and killed him by the hands of lawless men. All of this in God's providence and in his sovereign hand." When we consider the character of God and who he is, when we see in the passage before us that God is a God of providence, and we adore who he is, true adoration should lead us in two ways. One, confession, where we realize that we are sinners and could do some of the same things that Judas and the chief priest did in the passage. We could be people that seek sin, seek for an opportunity. We could be those people with misplaced joy, where we are glad at our benefit or at the hurt or pain in others, where we could act just like Judas, scheming and trying to find an opportunity to get ahead. We do those same things. And in light of God's providence, in light of his patience, in light of his character, it should lead us sometimes to confession that that is our God and is unworthy of him. But secondly, when we consider and adore the character of God, we should be thankful. And as I think through today, as I go through my Wednesday, I want you to know it's a great opportunity to be thankful for a God that is patient with us, for a God that loves us, for a God whose perfect plan was in action during this Passion Week. And he is worthy of our worship. If you are a child of God, verses like this, passages like this that we read, should lead us to confession, to thanksgiving, when we recognize who God is. He loves us. He desires fellowship with us. He loves being part of our lives, and he is worthy of it. Let today be a day that we adore the character and person of God.